Hey everybody, welcome to another FFTCG interview, and today with me I have a very, very special guest. He's coming all the way from Japan. He is the one, the only, Ghido Wallace, but you might know him better as Eureka. Jared, how are you doing today?
I'm doing pretty good. Thanks for having me on today. How are you doing?
Oh, I'm doing great, man. Thank you for joining me. You are a writer for FFTCG Crystarium, correct? The website. And I have always enjoyed reading all the things you guys put out. You've got a very fancy design, and like anytime there's a new article, I just can't wait to click on it. It's always very enjoyable. I think you did an Opus 12 review, right? Like you kind of did a quick review of all the cards.
Yeah, usually I do a legend review only, but we've been so far apart, and everybody's thirsty for some of that content. So I did a full set review last set, and I'll try to do that again this Opus 13 as well.
That's awesome. I very much enjoyed reading what you wrote, and I personally like your little rating scale. I was glad you did more than that because I think you're a very good writer, and I'll use this as a segue because I'll never forget what you wrote about Neo X Death, where you said, look, everyone's already got their opinion on this card. Can we all just agree on one thing? Nobody wanted this in the game,
Yeah.
And it was funny because I was watching the RVA weeklies this week, and the grand finals, there was this Neo X Death deck. He'd been taking everyone to town. Kid you not, he went second, and what he did was pitch 3 cards, Neo X Death, pitch 2, there's Y'shtola. It was just like, oh, okay, I guess the game's over now. And the other guy was playing, I think, like Mono Fire Samurai, so I was like, well, yeah, you can't target him now, so just enjoy losing. So, you said no one wanted him in the game, and, well, when we have cards that nobody wants in the game, what do? Well, we ban them. And it was so fortuitous that I was able to get you on here this week because, surprise, surprise, we got a ban this week. This is only Is this the 5th ban? We've got Gesper,
this will be the 5th ban.
Riku, Donnarumma, and now Guido, the big turtle himself.
5th ban in standard. Yeah.
In standard, yeah, of course, yeah. Not counting the title bans. I know they've got the Jesse and Felthanos and all that. So yeah, that was quite a surprise because, folks, today our subject is bans. Some people don't care. Some people, this is a hot, divisive topic, but we're gonna dig into it today, and Eureka here is gonna help me. So, bans, we have our 5th ban. Let's just start with the most recent news. Guido, what do you think of that?
Yeah, so this is obviously very contentious throughout the community right now, but I personally don't think if we're just looking at the Opus 12 meta that Guido really needed to be banned. Mm-hmm. But in the article they said that there could be more stuff in the future that Guido is going to pose problems for. So maybe this was like inhibiting design in some other places. And when Brawleye was being designed, they're like, well, but you have to put Guido in your deck, right? So, they kind of like let it slide, but they can't like keep doing that forever. If they keep letting it slide, then it's just become more of a problem. So if more cards are coming out that Guido can kind of do unfair things the way it does with Brawleye, then I think it was a great and solid choice for a ban, especially because it has no impact on any other real deck.
Yeah. No, that's interesting. So, man, it was so funny because I feel so torn on this. So first of all, just, to put out my answer so everyone knows how I feel about it, I'm fine with bans. I think bans are very healthy for a card game. Obviously you don't just ban everything and you don't ban something the moment it comes out, but you test it, you give it time to breathe, and if if it makes the game better, ban it. Nobody wants to play against Turbo Discard. I don't think anyone's missing those days. So the funny thing with Ghido Ban is that it's so weird to me to target Guido because, Barrel-Eye is the issue right now, right? Who knows what'll come out later, but for right now, Barrel-Eye was the problem. Nobody played Guido. Without Barrel-Eye, people consider Guido, that's a worthless card. Like, that card is never even in that, and they even mentioned that in the articles that, well, it never saw play, so we didn't think anyone would use it. And so it's so strange to me that, like, I understand that, again, with the way it's designed, perhaps Guido will impact stuff in the future, but it's like, but Barrel-Eye is the problem. Barrel-Eye on his own is still an obnoxious card. I've played him in decks with No-No, with Locke, with Zidane, and, his other effects are still really annoying. He's clearly strong, so it's so strange to me. Like, I get it, but I don't get it, because it's like, but that guy sucks on his own. This guy is still good on his own. Why do you ban the one that sucks versus banning the one that's still good? What do you think about that?
Yeah, so I think there is some merit to that line of thinking, but I think that they really liked how No-No and Brawleye work together. I think they enjoy these kinds of cards that they reward you a lot for in very like specific metas when you're willing to like build around build around a theme like that. So like if you activate your backups, like No works really well with Chocolat, which also works with Brawleye. So you kind of like lock yourself into these weaker element combinations when you do stuff like that. Because if you're playing Wind Ice, then with like No or whatever, you're kind of locking yourself into Wind Ice at that point. And I think that was kind of the intention with leaving Brawleye open was, like they want Wind Ice or, decks that tend to be weaker. They want to leave the strong cards available to them and just not have them be like off-color flashes into an otherwise not wind or not ice deck that works very well with specifically Guido.
That's fair. And I'm curious to know how you feel about this, because for some of the people who didn't want to see Ghido banned or thought, maybe it was unnecessary, I've seen the arguments. I see the counter arguments of like, well, you can use a backup breaking, power to get rid of it. If you have a Minwoo, it just basically shuts it off anyway. It's never going to do anything to you. If you kill the Brawleye, then it doesn't matter anyway. He's not there. So obviously there are counterplays, but I guess the way I kind of feel about that too is that, there's counterplays to everything. And I don't know, there does seem to be something, at least to me, inherently unfair about, right, but I can infinitely hit you. So for example, I'm a huge fan of Warriors of Light, and there's a Light Warrior of Light in there that says reduce damage they all take by 2,000. So if you had a bunch of like 9k Warriors of Light and he was on the field, even though every time Brawleye triggered it would only be 1,000 damage, it didn't matter because, okay, I'll just do it 9 or 10 times then. And so that's kind of, that part is like, when I think of it in that context, I do think, yeah, that's insane that they can just do that as many times as possible until you die. Like, how do you feel about that?
Yeah, it is kind of insane, but it also comes back to the whole exactly what they said in the argument, right? We're just like, it's a multicolor card that you have to play like a terrible backup in another color to do. So like really the whole deck is kind of built around keeping it and protecting it. And I think that in the future, we're only going to see more of this kind of thing. Because like if you compare Final Fantasy to other card games that are similar, like this is kind of the natural evolution for card games, right? Where like eventually two cards are going to combo really well if they both have like specific and unique text. And I think that the notion of like infinite damage, while it is really strong, it definitely shows, if you like take a look at some of the decks that are playing it, it has a really, really big cost. Yeah. And in the end, I don't think that any of the Guido Brawleye decks were the tier 1 decks to beat this format. And in that regard, I didn't think that Guido needed this kind of, fast ban before Opus 13, but I can't see the Opus 13 card pool either. So
right. Sure, we don't know everything that's in there. So I'm glad you brought that up. I want to kind of jump on that point you made, is that tier 1 decks. Do you think in order for something to be ban-worthy that it needs to be a tier 1 meta deck? For example, I joined kind of close to the end of Opus 7, but I've seen some of those old streams with the Turbo Ice discard, and it was everywhere, and, people were just wrecking people all over. So clearly it was very competitive. Do you think that's necessary, or do you think it is also okay to be like, even if this isn't that good, it's just not enjoyable to play against, or whatever the reasoning is, and so it's okay to ban it because of that?
No, I don't think it actually has to be tier 1. And I know this is kind of a divisive opinion nowadays, which is kind of shocking to me to some regard. But yeah, nobody wants to play unenjoyable games, right? Yeah. While it is true that most of our cards so far have been banned once they become a problem in a tier 1 strategy, I don't think that's necessarily true in the case of Guido, and I don't think that has to be true going forward. Other card games have this, all the time, where it's like maybe a strategy isn't tier 1, but like 3 or 4 out of 10 times, if it just causes a game to like end immediately or like not happen without any decision making, like nobody wants that in the game.
Yeah, no, that's a great point. Watching that Neo X Death match the other night, like that wasn't a match. It was over on turn 2 before the Samurai even got a second turn. Hey, Neo X Death Y'shtola there. The game's over. It's like, okay, well, that wasn't exciting to watch. It certainly wasn't fun for the guy who lost the match, and I don't know if it was even fun for the guy who won it. Like, he's probably, yeah, whatever, I just won the game. I talked to Christopher Matisky recently, and he said something that's kind of been circling in my mind, where he said, I don't like cards like that because I don't like the design aspect that, hey, you must now draw this very specific answer in your deck, otherwise you just lose. You know, you have to now hope. Basically, you're almost in top deck mode at that point, that this card does such and such effect so much that unless you get, you know, at card XYZ, you just lose on the spot. And so that's kind of been running around in my head when he says, like, yeah, that's a good point. And I was glad to hear you say that. It is kind of funny that is divisive, but yeah, even if there was a card like Guido that, okay, yeah, nobody used it, like, again, balanced ways to counter it, whatever, is it fun to sit there and watch someone, here, hold on, let me Guido you a zillion times until your whole board dies? I don't find that enjoyable personally, but maybe that's just me.
I will say, to make a case for the Ghido Brawleye, you know,
Please.
Guido staying,
Yeah.
really, if you look at like the whole meta right now and everything, Ghido Brawleye is really the only strategy that can really support a lot of the natural counters to like Neo Xth. So it's like you get to play like Famfrit and Krill, which is good against Storm, and like all of these anti-meta cards, and it's all backed by the idea that like against normal decks you have Ghido Brawleye. And so like it kind of introduced this kind of new anti-meta style of play that wasn't necessarily in the game before. And I did enjoy that, but I think it would be cooler if it wasn't an infinite damage combo.
Yeah,
that made it viable.
Okay, so I have to ask you this, because this is something I've always wondered, and I've seen other card games do it. I know they do it in Yu-Gi-Oh! And I don't know much about Pokemon, but maybe they do it there. And that is the idea of, instead of banning cards, limiting cards. So, if I may, let me kind of set the stage for you, and then I want to hear what you have to say. So Square Enix often says that one of the reasons they're reluctant to ban is because they don't want to take away these cards from players. You know, you collect the cards, especially if it's a character you're attached to, they don't want to tell you, hey, that's like a dead card now, it's just going to sit in your binder because you can never use it. But we never ever really seem to talk about limiting cards. And just for anyone out there who doesn't know what that means, so for example, normally you can run a maximum of 3 copies of a card. If you were to limit a card, you could restrict that to, say, 2 or 1 copy. So I'm going to use Diabolos, for example, the 5-cost Diabolos Wind summon, which everybody knows is one of the best summons in the game. It's definitely one of the best in Wind. What if that card was restricted to 1 instead of 3 copies? Now, I know some people would say, well, it's still in there, so it's, let's say if it's still a broken card, then it's still a terror. But I think of things like, well, right, but now if it hits into damage, it's gone. You can't use it again. You know, now Kryl or Citra or Porum just has 1 less copy of it to try to get back. And to me, it seems like that's the best of both worlds. You still get to keep the card, so players aren't, you know, they don't, oh, I've totally lost that card. But it also pulls in its power a bit so that it's not the big terror. You know, maybe if there is this one Neo X death, but you get rid of it, you RFG, now it's gone. You don't ever have to worry about it again. So that's why I'm kind of in favor of that. But please tell me, I'd love to hear your opinion on that.
Chapters actually had a limited list at the very end.
Oh, okay.
Yeah, so there were a couple. I'll kind of talk about both types of limitation that existed in chapters.
Please do. I don't know much about chapters, so this will be good for me.
There was a ban list at one point, and that ban list kind of got eliminated along the way. There were no straight up ban cards, so they replaced it with a limited list. Okay. And a lot of the thinking at the time, as I understand it, was that if you have this huge density of, like, the bigger the card pool gets, the more appropriate a limited list becomes. Because if you have 3 copies of let's go with Neo Xth here. If you have 3 copies of Neo Xth, but Neo Xth is the only 4 that's worth protecting in the game, you're just always going to play the 3 copies, and the deck can't exist outside of, if you were to limit it, right? Yeah. Like Neo Xth Turbo decks, they just wouldn't exist at all if Neo Xth was that one. It's just too hard to pull off.
Right.
And once the 1 Xth is gone, it's gone forever, right? But if you have this really big card pool, and cards like Neo Xth exist, like a mini version of Neo Xth, or some kind of different option, then if you have like one of a few different options, maybe it's not so bad to limit cards, because that kind of deck can still exist. And maybe Neo Xth isn't specifically the type of card that we want this to be true for, but you know, Diabolos or Ritz or whatever, right?
Say, last Opus, Ritz that was what was so frustrating, is you'd get rid of a Ritz and it just comes right back again. It's like, oh, this card. Sorry.
Yeah, so maybe Ritz is the good example here. If we have just Ritz, like, you can't really play Marsh Ritz decks if just the 1 Ritz. Yeah. But if we have like Ritz, And then now we have like Remedy, and we start to have like these different options for Marsh, but Ritz is the strongest. Maybe the deck can still exist and function with just one Ritz. And I think that was a big part of the thinking there. A quick side note, the other type of restriction that existed in chapters was you can only have 3 cards with a specific name rather than card code. So the only limitation that this was true for was Garnet. So you couldn't play like Garnets with different card codes. You could only have three Garnets in your deck.
So basically, if they had a special, you could at max only ever do 2 specials, essentially. Interesting.
And this was specifically because Garnet there was a light Garnet that had a special that was just so insanely broken that literally any other Garnet just made it insane if you could have enough copies. So they decided that they'd let Garnet live, and you could run 3 of her, but you couldn't run any other card name Garnets if you did. Yeah. So that would be a different way to approach bans going forward at some point.
Yeah,
perhaps.
That's interesting. Given the state of the game right now in Opus 12, it's hard to think of anything where that would be relevant. Like maybe Alua. Yeah. Alua is probably the most used special in the game with Shoal. But even then, like, would you want 4? I mean, maybe Shoal is incredible, so maybe you would. But other than her, I can't think of anything else that... and granted, but there's only one version of Alua anyway, so technically we've already maxed
for now.
Out. Yeah, for now. At the moment, that might be an issue if they ever print another version of her. That's interesting. Well, I appreciate you saying that because again, I'd never really heard a good counter argument to the limiting factor. But you kind of opened my eyes there. I hadn't considered that. If you have decks that do rely on having multiple copies of a card, you might just kill it outright if you reduce it to 1. So that's interesting. That's very interesting.
I should say I'm still in favor of trying limited cards.
Yeah, but I would like to try
there is this counter argument for it.
Okay, so I'm glad you said that. So we're going to segue to this point because there is, it at least seems to be this idea, and obviously it's true for the present. What do you think of the idea that once a card is banned, it can never be unbanned? I didn't play Yu-Gi-Oh! A whole lot, but I do know there was a lot of cards that jumped on and off that list. Now, again, in Final Fantasy so far, once something has gone on the list, it has not returned. And looking at those cards, I don't think they should return. Like, for anyone out there, there was a thread a little while ago for people like, no, they should bring it back. Trust me, I played against a guy using a Dataluma somewhat recently. It's not enjoyable. It's still, and if anything, there's more ways to ping it, more ways to reactivate. Like, yeah, again, Riku, that was one of the things they said. Oh, God, could you imagine Riku with Ritz? No, thanks.
Yeah.
So, do you think... and again, I don't know if they have a hardline stance on that. Do you think they should have like, hey, once it's on the ban list, we're done with it? Or do you think it's like, well, no, maybe we can bring it back one day?
I think that they should consider reintroducing cards. There's no cards that are currently banned that I think would improve the format were they to return. That being said, from a balance perspective only, I think you could maybe bring back Thaumaturge and you could maybe bring back Dataluma. I don't think that would be a particularly popular choice for the development team to make. I don't think a lot of people would really enjoy it, but I think they could come back from a balance perspective only. I definitely think that Gesper and Riku just will never be okay ever again. They're way too broken.
Yeah, I can see. Yeah, I've heard. I didn't play in those days, but Gesper particularly seemed to just be like, good gravy. Yeah. That thing was a monster, literally.
Yeah, and Riku is just. As the guy who made the deck, Riku just shouldn't come back. It's it makes
you were responsible for the whole mill thing.
Yeah,
huh?
It's a very like specific strategy, and like nobody wants to play against it. Nobody wants to play mirrors, and then once it gets popular, it's just not an enjoyable format for anybody to play.
Well, and I remember I think that was Opus 9 when that really got big because Porum came out and you had the new Famfrit, and it was basically just like stall the game out. Famfrit to your heart's content, recycle with the Porum, and I played those decks, and even though like I beat it once or twice, it wasn't enjoyable. Even like when it wasn't enjoyable because it just felt like I wasn't playing the game. It was just like, here, let me draw. All right, pass to you, and there goes half my deck. So yeah, that was one of those that like I don't care if I could even beat it occasionally. Like it wasn't a fun. I felt like I felt like they were playing solitaire and I was just watching.
Yeah. As the only guy playing the deck, it was fun for the time, and then it wasn't fun anymore. So.
That's fair. Okay, so I have to ask, and you can think about it if you need to. Since we're talking about bans, if you were the designer right now, what card would you want to ban? Or you can pick multiple if you want. Even if it's not broken. Like, this is not a statement on balance. Just like, I don't like that card. Get rid of it.
Well, I think it has to be Neo Exdeath.
Yeah. Some people, with the Guido announcement, were like, why would they not pick Neo Exdeath? Like, why would they pick this over him?
Yeah, I said that too. And to make a guess about why they would pick only Guido and not Neo Exdeath, I think that there's probably a lot of resistance to banning a card that, one, just came out in the last set.
I thought that
and
too.
2 is a legend.
Yeah.
I don't think that they would prefer not to ban legends if and when possible. But I really wish that it just wasn't in the game. I don't think anybody is super happy about it. So
yeah, no, I agree. Well, and I hope that, because I thought that too, and that's kind of one of the reasons when I was thinking of like, well, if Barrel Eye is the issue, why'd they ban but Barrel Eye just came out. So I do understand that, like, we don't want to ban something we just put out. It's still the active opus it's in. At the same time, I also hope they don't take that to such an extreme that, no, we're going to let a problem card exist because we don't want to ban it for the reasons you said, because it's a legend, because it's whatever. Because, I don't think, unless you love to abuse Neo Exdeath, I can't imagine many people being sad if they don't have to worry about that card anymore. Yeah.
In terms of a few other just like cards that I wish that they would maybe consider for a ban, whether or not they actually choose to go through with it, I think Norstalen has really homogenized deck building a lot.
And it only gets better every opus. Even in Opus 13, like, look at the new Crystal Chronicles. It's like, good gravy. What doesn't this card grab?
Yeah, I thought, at the time, for a long time, maybe up until Opus 10, that, like, Norstalen, other cards will catch up. And it's just not happening.
Yeah.
Like, they're not doing it. So I think if they start printing some other backup searchers, maybe Norstalen can be forgiven. But oh my god, it's just so overwhelmingly homogenizing. Like, every deck wants to be an Earth Wind deck when it can, just because it just benefits so much from Norstalen. And outside of that, I think Zidane too, the legend Water Zidane.
Really interesting.
Yeah, well, I don't think that it needs to be banned, but I think they should consider it because it seems to be the only way that aggro is forgiven in this game, outside of Neo Exdeath, that aggro is really forgiven in this game. And I wish that they would print better, like, regular aggro cards and then just say, okay, just forget about Zidane 2. This was a mistake. We can just make aggro better without making Zidane, overpowered.
Interesting.
So if you like ban Zidane, all of a sudden, like, there's so much room for like haste to get better. But as long as Zidane 2 is in the game, I don't think that they can do that. Otherwise, it just becomes like this whole "did you open it? Did you not?" kind of thing. And I think that's been going on and getting more and more prevalent since it was printed. And I think that's another card that they really need to keep their eye on.
So you're referring to the Opus 8 Water Legend, correct?
Yes.
That's interesting because I defend that card a lot because I personally think, and tell me if I'm crazy here, I think it's a very balanced card because what I like about it is that, yes, it has a threat. Yes, it feeds into itself, but it is very weak. So, I mean, you can put a backup VV, like, it's so easy to get rid of it. And to me, that was at least good design, whereas, like, something like a Braska's or a Neo Exdeath, if you're trying to take that out with damage-based removal, good luck, because it's 10k and then it's going to punish you every time. So, like, to me, I kind of like that Zidane. Again, you can tell me if I'm crazy. I actually got excited for a moment because when you said Zidane, I hate Zidane, the hero version from Opus 3.
Yeah.
That's like, if that would be my card. So if I'll flip the question on myself,
sure.
I cannot tell you how many games I'm like doing okay, and I'm holding an answer in hand. Well, here comes Zidane. Let me just pluck the best card out of your hand and whoop right into the garbage.
Yeah.
Oh, it drives me insane.
Sure.
They must love that character because he always gets great cards.
Yeah. So for the Zidane 2, just to reiterate, I think that it's fine right now, but I think that, like, it's really holding back aggro in general, because if they start buffing aggro, then this card, the card just spirals out of control so fast. It gets so strong. Fair. And it could be a problem. Right now the dials tweak just enough that it's balanced. But like it's like we saw with Mid Previa, the introduction of Mid and Sid Previa, how much stronger that card got, like, instantly.
Yeah.
Like, I think that's true going forward too. Like, you add one card that says give a forward haste, and all of a sudden it's like, well, maybe it's all of a sudden very broken,
Well, and what might be something to watch. Well, maybe not. I was gonna say Celestia, but Celestia just says water characters can't be broken outright, so they could still blow it up with, like, damage-based stuff, which is what he was always weak to anyway. So
I think it's something to watch with the new Leviathan.
Yeah, I don't remember what that
Leviathan.
does. I don't think it's been picture-wise spoiled yet, but what was its effect?
It was in Japanese on the poster,
okay.
but so it's a 2 CP water EX summon. This says choose one forward you control. The next time it would take damage this turn, reduce the damage by I think 4K or 5K, but I think it's 4K. Draw one card, and then it has a damage 5 ability that says give all of your forwards cannot be targeted by your opponent's summons or abilities.
Oh man!
So it's like it seems like Zidane is going to get more and more uninteractive with time.
Yeah, although that is a damage 5, so and usually he's not around at that point.
You can still throw it out turn 1, and then if they VV it or whatever, you Leviathan and protect it. And it seems like even just that it's going to get more and more difficult to interact with it going forward, and that could be problematic at some point.
So since you mentioned Zidane, I want to piggyback off of him and kind of talk about, okay, so for example, another card I would be happy to see thrown into the garbage is Kadaj, because I hate that card, and he's so annoying, and he's so strong. And what I was thinking about, especially in Opus 11, so what's interesting to me about Zidane 2 is that he is an early game card, right? You don't want to see him later in the game because chances are you're not going to have enough cards in hand to make him unblockable. They're going to have forwards. You want to see him turn 1. You could argue that about Neo X Death too, is that he actually gets a lot weaker much later in the game. You want to see him early. But cards like Kadaj, to me, he's what I would call an all-game card. You can slam him down turn 1, mid-game, late game, and he's just always going to be a terror. So kind of thinking of that in mind, what am I trying to say here? Well, one, I want to say ban Kadaj. Get rid of him. I hate him. But that idea of do you think they really should kind of keep in mind that when does this card want to come down? Is it late game, middle game, early, or is it just an all? Because those all game cards, Ritz was very similar. Ritz, once you got 3 backups, you could put her down on 0 damage. She's great, and guess what? Once she gets to 3, she just gets that much better. So
yeah, no, I think you're totally right about Kadaj. I think Kadaj is so obscene because there's so many decks that just shouldn't be good or aren't well placed in the meta, but you throw 1, 2, 2, or sometimes I've even seen the dreaded 3 Kadaj, but it just makes the deck instantly playable.
Yeah, it's insane
because Kadaj is he's a one-man win condition, and
he is. You are not kidding. I have won plenty of matches putting him down turn 1, and he just does all 7 points of damage by himself. Good luck. Have fun dealing with that.
And I think I will say it's gotten better this set than it was last set because Alexander is a 3 of staple now, which is not something that was necessarily true up until this opus. Even when Alexander is run in 3 of, he's still insanely good, and he can remove the Alexander if you're playing a recursive deck. So and you can't krill and then shoot the Alexander because it's gone on your turn. It's just so it's a very frustrating card to play against on every spectrum. If you're the control deck, it's ripping apart your break zone, it's zilling your blockers.
Right.
If you're an aggro deck, it's giving them it's giving your opponent's attackers brave.
It's so versatile. I said this once on the RVA podcast, so for anyone hears this again, excuse me for repeating myself, but I would have thought that card. So what I really hate about that card is, to me, it's very brain dead. You don't even think about it. You slam it down, and then he just goes to town for however long he's there, probably until close to the end of the game. What would have been interesting to me is if you just changed one line of text, and that's he returns from, beyond the grave or whatever at the start of your main phase. What does that do? That does a couple things. One, it means your opponent can actually respond to the effect. That's one of the most annoying things, is that, you can't respond. You can't respond. So even if you got something, you can't do it. 2, he wouldn't be able to attack that turn. So it would actually create this dynamic where you as the player have to choose what you value. Do I want to get an attack with Kadaj, or do I want to bounce him for his effect? But no, he returns at the end of your opponent's turn, so they can't respond, and he gets to attack every time and then freely run away he's such a little bitch.
Yeah, I will say that one of the most frustrating things about Kadaj is that it feels like Amaterasu should definitely be able to do something against the card, and it just doesn't. It doesn't reach the 9K mark without Terror or Setsuna, and you can't do it after the first time it comes down. It's so ridiculous. I think maybe if we get more Famfrit type effects, one possibility that I was speculating on this set was that maybe we get more targeted Famfrit. Instead of both players sack a forward, we get the one from Chapters, which was 1 CP higher, but only your opponent has to sack for it.
Really?
Maybe this makes Kadaj more acceptable, but Kadaj works so well with Fanford as it is that it's a very weird place to be in terms of like playing around this card that just solos so many games, and it's so straightforward and good all the time.
Yeah,
very frustrating to play.
That is, and I'll reiterate, like, I don't like that all game design. No, I can just play it anytime, and it's always incredible. Like, I again, the Zidane, I can understand why he's frustrated, but at least he is strong early. That is his power.
Yeah,
he's not very good beyond that, and I really like that kind
totally
of design.
Agree.
Awesome. Yeah, I'm curious to see if they'll do more. Like, again, they seem very reluctant, but the Guido was quite the surprise this opus, so who knows.
Yeah, I will say that the deck has been, in a couple of different forums, has been very popular in Japan specifically, which might have more of an impact on how, the dev team sees it, because they kind of get information from the outside community very sparsely, or I don't think that they look at FF Dex results or anything like that, but they get to see all of the lists that One Shot Masters. They get to see everything that's being played and on the Discord, and there's been a lot of people who are running the original creator was Chocoboshi, I believe, the Earth Water version, and then there's the Ice Wind Water, which I think is not even close to a problem, but was very popular in Western Japan.
Yeah.
And so it's been a surprisingly popular archetype here, I think, and that might have been an influence on the decision.
Yeah, that's fair. That's very fair. That's awesome. Well, Jared, I can't thank you enough for coming on here and giving us your thoughts and listening to my rants, and I got to, learn a lot from you as well. So we'll see what happens going forward. I'm kind of got fingers crossed that they'll at least try limited. And that's my thing too, is like, it can't hurt to try it. Like, try limited. If it doesn't work, if it's, you can always unlimit it. And that would, just give the card back then. Okay, sorry, that was a mess up. So here's open. Is there anywhere you want people to find you? I know you're on the Crystarium. Anywhere else you want to plug?
Yeah, you can read my articles at Crystarium, or you can check out my stream at twitch.tv/Eureka-, and I'm also on Twitter at Eureka-.
Awesome. Absolutely. Go check his stuff out. Jared's a heck of a guy. Sir, thank you so much again for being with me here. Let us know in the comments. Everyone has an opinion on this, so come on, just say it. What card do you want to see banned? It's okay. No hate here. Everyone just express yourselves. All right. Take care. We'll see you next time. Bye.
Thanks for having me on. Bye-bye.